Why should Jordan Peterson have all the fun? I've often thought and said that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And for this reason, our writers and teachers in many ways get the most benefit from their teaching. Teaching is a process of pattern assimilation. So all of us occupy a current position. So we are all living 12, if not many more, rules for life. And we're living that in not only our predominant thoughts and feelings, but we're also living that in our daily choices. The most powerful form of prayer is action. And what we do with our attention, what we do with our time, what we do with our money is our densest form of prayer, a prayer we make and speak every day in the density of our words. If you want to know what a culture or an individual values, just look to the ways they allocate the minutes of their time and the underlying beliefs and strategies that create that pattern of behavior. When we learn something, we first encounter it with our minds. We think about it. We have feelings about our thoughts. Those thoughts and feelings create sensations in our body. We assess that. We process the information. And based on that, we decide if it's something we want to aspire to. Now, deciding that it's something we want to aspire to is a far cry from embodying it in daily behavior. And so we keep thinking and feeling to the degree that we honor what we're learning. Slowly we bring it down. And ultimately, we learn by assimilating the new pattern such that our moment-by-moment actions, our moment-by-moment thoughts and feelings actually reflect the thoughts and feelings that we say we want to learn. And one of the best vehicles of facilitating that transformation is to teach it. So there are many rules for life, and in some ways it's a wonderful adventure for each person to think about what are the most important rules for them. And somewhere between 3 and possibly 10, possibly 12, something that we're able to grasp and relate to is a good set of focuses. So here are a few of mine as I'm being inspired by Jordan's and challenge myself to think. What are the most essential things that have been useful to me and, as I read a lot, seem useful to other people? So rule 1, climb and help other people to climb Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So Abraham Maslow studied healthy, successful people around the world. And what he discovered was that every single human being has certain needs, the need to survive, and that these needs exist in a form of hierarchy. If you have to choose between making a difference and surviving, most people are going to do what's going to help them survive to the next day, keep the body alive. Now, there can be towards, if you've competently moved through survival and security of survival and love and belonging, and you're up at the top, there are people that make sacrifices, even sacrificing one's life for a higher sense of meaning or purpose. And in that sense, transcend this hierarchy of human needs. But generally speaking, if you take 1,000 people and none of them are going to survive, there's limited oxygen, only 5 or 10 of the people are going to survive with that oxygen, there's usually going to be a scramble to see who can keep the body alive. And once that has been met, once you've survived, the next challenge is to create certainty, to create sustainability in that survival. Once you have a little bit of certainty and stability, the next thing is to look for love and belonging. Now, particularly in a mammalian species such as ours, we are a communal species. So if you think of monkeys, for example, guarding for predators, finding the best food, you can see that there is increased survival in partnering in a pack. Now, if you understand that the underlying physics or mathematics supports increased survival if you have a cooperative community, then you understand that love and belonging, acceptance in the community, and blessing to participate in the community is a form of survival. Survival, security of survival, love and belonging, those two are very closely linked in a pack mammalian species. So you have your first 3 needs. And then comes the need for self-esteem, to feel good about the kind of person that you are, to like who you are. And this ties in strongly with how well you are liked. And how well you are liked ties in strongly to how much you embody the dominant values of the cult or culture of which you are a part. So in our cult, we like smart people. And one of the reasons we like smart people is we're very materialistic in many ways. And so whoever has the coolest things has high rank in the cult. Well, smart people are better at engineering and manufacturing and staying in business and creating the coolest things, or at least we have that perception. And so we like smart people. We also like funny people, and this has a light side and a dark side. As a very chauvinistic culture, one of the things that we appreciate is the diffusion of emotional anxiety and the diffusion of emotional tension and the diffusion of emotional intensity. We don't like the deep waters. We don't like the shadow side of humanity, dread, trauma, terror, loneliness. We're terrified of these parts of our own psyche as a culture, and humor helps to diffuse that. And so we like people who are funny, because someone who can crack a joke breaks the spell and allows emotion to start moving again, at least for the people who are outside of the suffering. And there you have a tension between someone who's, for example, lost the love of their life, is for the most part not going to be able to, in a healthy way, integrate their grief and move through their feelings and dissociate from them with humor at the same time. Because dissociation has the benefit of it can allow things to move on a little bit, but it also has the cost of, if you're dissociated from something, you can't affect it. You can't process and digest emotion that you're dissociating from. You can't, if you're a gear in a motor and you dissociate from the other gear, the motor is no longer turning the car. It's like putting the clutch in. So obviously it's very easy on the engine. Everyone who's got an engine relaxes when you put the clutch in. On the other hand, you can't move the car when the clutch is in. You've got to associate with something you want to impact. And so how do you move in that direction? So right after, and so, to have love and belonging, you have to associate with the values and traditions of the cult of which you are a part. To have a sense of liking oneself in an environment in which, if other people like you, you are more likely to survive, it makes sense that we support the parts of ourselves that other people like. Because if I say, I like boasting. So if I say I like myself and I like boasting and I just enjoy exaggerating and focusing on all of my wonderful qualities. And you could say, well, great, you like yourself. But if you're in an environment in which every time you do that, everyone else says, oh, that's a terrible trait, then you're going to be punished in that environment for cultivating this sense of exuberance. Every child is born feeling like they're the center of the universe. And then, that's whacked out of them over, the next 10,000 human interactions as they learn that in this cult, you don't mean anything. And so they still have that feeling, it comes up, but, it moves into the shadow domain of the cult. The shadow domain being those parts of the cult that are not welcome. They're part of the underlying mathematics of the human psyche, or they wouldn't be there. But they're not welcome in the conscious, in the accepted, in the blessed terrain of the cult. So there's a correlation between what we like in ourselves and what others like in us. Generally, we will default to emulate liking the parts that other people like about us and emulate disliking the parts of ourselves that other people dislike. And in America, where emotions are incredibly unpopular, and need in particular, being needy, having needs, is incredibly unpopular in America because it challenges the obsession with the individual. America is an individual-obsessed cult. There are other cults, 10,000 cultures in human history, that are the exact opposite. It's all about the group and stuff. But, America, it's you're self-made, And this is, of course, a complete joke. We say this term self-made, and it doesn't make any sense. You say, so you made the oxygen, you just breathe? No, I didn't do that. So you made the food? No, I didn't make the food. So you made the light that's keeping you alive? No, I didn't do that. You made the waters? You made the waters? No. You made the minerals. You just poof, and minerals start existing. No, you didn't make the water. So what? So you made the blackboard. No, some other company. So you made the technology that made the blackboard. No, I didn't do that either. What? So you made your clothes, right? No, I pressed buy with one click. Some other company in China shipped them. And so you made the paint that painted the clothes. No, I didn't do that. And so you made your jewelry? No. So these 200 million year old gemstones, you made those? No. How about the diamond blades that cut the gemstone? You made those? No. How about the phone that's recording all this? You made that? No. So you're self-made, right? How about your body? You made that on your own, right? Your parents had nothing to do with that. Their parents, you have to think about it. You don't exist unless your great grandparents existed. They had to make your great grandparents so that they could make your grandparents, so they could make your parents, so that you could exist, but you're self-made, right? So, we invent these absurd cultural memes of thinking. And there's a huge gap between cult knowledge and scientific knowledge. A scientist would never say, based on the evidence, you're self-made. But a given cult wants to go around saying that, by all means. Cults are rarely scientific. They're in the political domain within, for example, in the United States, coming across a traumatic voyage, establishing independence through war, conquering and fighting with the natives, fighting with each other, a civil war. So when you've got this traumatic history, and you've got a situation where famine, cold, disease, political war, this economic war, theft, violence, when you've got all of these different forces that are threatening the existence of a culture, then what we do is we emphasize certain traits. And America would not exist without declaring independence and then fighting for that. And so we have this historical sense that the things that helped us survive, feel secure, have some sense of love and belonging and esteem is our independence. And you take that down to the very tiniest level and you've got the individual. It's up to you. You're a self-made person. And you can find plenty of data to support, like if we hadn't, not us, if our ancestors hadn't declared this and hadn't been willing to fight and do this, then we might be a British or a French colony of some kind. So we're independent. We are independent. We did this. And so there's certainly data to support this kind of independent focus. There's also plenty of data to support the exact opposite. And it's every cult passes on its truths to a certain extent, just as we're doing here, by emphasizing some data disproportionately to other data that is being de-emphasized in order to maintain the sanity or the cohesion of the cultural narrative. I mean, you can't say you're independent and then ask, did you personally make everything? Because that makes no sense. So we just don't ask that question. And then you have we'll leave that for another time. But we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. After self-esteem, it gets a little bit fuzzier, in part because there's less statistical data, meaning fewer people. If you look at, for example, when I look around at the number of Americans who are secure in self-esteem, meaning they've survived and that's satisfied. They're secure in their survival. Low debt or no debt, retirement fund, health care, savings, investing in things. They have good skills. They can choose a job here. They can choose a job there. They can keep themselves warm. They can function within the law. So, they're secure. And then they have love and belonging, a few close friends, some meaningful connection, love and belonging. They can be respected in their community, and they like themselves, and they have a sense of self-esteem. I mean, do 20% of the country really occupy even level 4, where it doesn't feel like an act, or constantly jungling or hoping this secret doesn't come out because then everything could fall apart, and if this happened and this happened, and it does tie in somewhat with our social and cultural and national engineering. Because when I interviewed 30 Danish people, this was a real eye-opener for me, because I've run my business since I was 17 years old. And so I was expecting, because the only thing I knew about Denmark was, other than that I had some ancestral history there, that's why my name is Dane, the only thing I knew about Denmark was that they had 80% taxes. And as a small business person, watching an incompetent government take 50% of my money constantly, and then looking at the waste relative to how I'd spend the money. When it's your own money, you always spend it better. Well, the government never is spending their own money. They're spending the people's money. And so, not surprisingly, when they have the choice, when I have the choice as a business owner to work an extra hour, it's Friday night, it's 5 p.m., and I've got a situation going on. And if I work until 6 p.m. and fix the situation, it'll save the business $500. Or I can say, that's it, 5 o'clock, that's the time. And it'll cost the business $500. So $500 for an hour of my time. Well, that's not bad, and that's how I think. And so if it comes to it, I'll spend the extra hour. But a government employee who's got the same decision, and it's your $500, it's not their money. It's not their job in their, we call it public service. It's a joke in the way that if you interview large sections of the, local government, do they feel honored to serve? What are you talking about? How are you doing this better to save me money? It's not your money. Get out of here. This is my job, and it's just a job. And so naturally, the government wastes a lot of money because it's not their money. And so as a small business person, I'm irritated by what? You couldn't repair that bridge without holding traffic up for a month? And $10 million? We could have done that on the weekend. We wouldn't have done this regulation. That doesn't even make sense. And it's like, well, we've got to do the regulations because it's like, who invents all this stuff? And it's just a quagmire of, absurdity. And so when I went to Denmark, I was fully expecting, and the reason I interviewed 30 Danish citizens was I was expecting that I would meet outraged citizens who wanted to live the American way, where you only pay 50% of your money in taxes. And you don't get to see all this as an employee, but if you're a business owner and you add up all the various deductions and payments and state and local and sales tax, you are paying a good 50% of your money in taxes. Now, I wanted to, hear what it was like to pay 80% of the money in taxes. So I interview one person. Well, what do you think of your country? I like it. Do you have health care? Yes, we all get free health care. Is it good? Yes, very good. What about your education? Well, we're all paid $1,000 a month to go to college and no college debt. So you have a college? Yes, I have a college education. And did you enjoy it? Yes. We all pick topics we like. Because the underlying question is not, can I use this skill to pay back $200,000 of student loans? The underlying question is, what do I want to learn? What could I be good at? So college educated, health care. I thought, surely all these people, because one of the things you learn from Republicans in America is that if you give people half a chance, they'll all be on the dole. They'll all be, taking money from the rich who worked hard. And so I thought, in Denmark, you can basically have the same quality of life not working as you can working. So I thought, surely there's going to be all these people who, the reason the taxes are high are the public services are at a very high level. So I thought, well, are you employed? Yes. Interesting. So you could not be working and making almost as much money. Yes. And you could go and get another job. Yes, because I said, so what happens if you don't like your job? Because Americans don't like their jobs as a statistical majority. So I said, so what happens if you don't like their jobs? And they say, well, I stop working at my job. And I say, well, what next? Well, it's nice to do something and make a difference. So I then am supported to train in another field, or I look around for a job with a boss that I like or something. They were all employed. And so clearly, and this is what's interesting, and I think these things go hand in hand. I believe, based on the data, that if you are college educated, studying something you're good at and are interested in, and you get a job with a team that you like working with, that draws on your talents, I think that people enjoy making a contribution. And this ties right into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because as we go beyond self-esteem, developing one's potential is actually a human need. Understanding what our abilities are and developing that potential is a human need. And we want to become excellent at something that we do. And they build on each other in the sense that we enjoy excellence in other human beings. And so, a lot of the videos that I've been making, not only do I not get paid for them, I pay money to make these videos because, of course, you have to buy the camera, buy the microphone, buy the blackboard, buy the green screen, and then I don't like the whole tedious upload, so I send them to Dropbox, and then I pay my assistant to, add the background of this or that, or title it and put it on this channel. And as a result, I pay money, and then I'm generally working to get better. Now, why? Why would anyone who's because this is why I think Einstein's question, it doesn't quite dovetail, but, Einstein said that the most important question is the universe a friendly place? Is the universe a friendly place? And in some ways, what he's asking is, do you think you're a good person? Because we have always projected and deified our own sense of self at its best. We've aspired to be something, and we project that out and we deify it. And, so for example, 2,000 years ago, you can say that, there were shepherds and peasants wandering around, and they were asked the question, what is God? Meaning, what is the future? And they said, well, it's a him, because we're chauvinistic. And the more physical an environment, meaning when you've got a culture down at survival, then you've got, the ranking is going to in part be in a Stone Age culture. You're dealing with physical muscle. And in a survival-oriented culture, you're dealing with physical brawn and survival. And men outperform women in a Stone Age environment, relying on physical muscle. Because men, as a gender, are superior physically. I'm a contractor. I can't afford political correctness. And so most of the people I hire are guys, and most of the people who want to work for me are guys. And that fits fairly well because statistically speaking, I've had maybe 10 women work for me and about 500 guys work for me. Statistically speaking, the men are going to pick a trench 20 to 100% faster than the woman, statistically speaking. And culturally speaking, I'm also going to defer more, be more polite to the woman. I don't feel as comfortable, culturally speaking, as a guy with crew talk. Like, come on, get a move on, guys. Move this. Don't be such an idiot. Come on, hold the rake like that. Move, okay, that's it. Good. That's guy talk on a crew, trying to get something done. No, don't do that. Come on. We need this trench done. And, this is certainly not romantic talk. And so if you're in a hard labor type environment, it tends, the people who come to me and say, I want to, do construction or landscaping are mostly men. And if I, statistically speaking, put 10 women next to 10 men in a hard, picking or barring or dig a big hole or stamina for 8-10 hours of this, statistically speaking, I'm going to feel more comfortable with a man in that environment. I'm going to feel more comfortable coaching a man in that environment. And they're going to work harder in that environment. And that's just common sense. If you just look at the build and even the way people dress. Because again, when in our culture we rank women based on appearance, just look at all the women's magazines. They're not on picks and shovels and tools. They're on dresses and this, and then you've got to have this. Let's be honest. We're ranking them based on appearance. Well, the female clothing in trend is not likely to be easy to work in, statistically speaking. And so these are statistics. They're not absolutes. I've had a couple of great female employees in hard labor situation who enjoyed the work. But, if there's no gender difference, well, why the hell are 9 applicants for a labor job going to be men? It's 50% of women out there. Why aren't they applying? Well, Most of them are common sense enough to know that, either they don't want to do picking and shoveling or whatever it is, or they understand that's not how their body is built optimally. Even you have things like breasts. Large breasts get in the way of certain types of work. When you're pushing on a root or something, and so there's differences, obviously. And so when I was interviewing these Danish citizens, I found they were all employed. I interviewed 30, and it was a stunning thing. So they were all employed. Every one of them employed. Every one of them liked their job. Every one of them was college educated. Every one of them was housed. They worked lower hours than the typical American, including me. And I saw bicycles that could be borrowed by tourists around Copenhagen. So I borrowed free bicycles, and there were bicycle lanes. And I saw a lot more windmills than I'd seen, in the US. And I understood that the sustainable energy was there was more sustainable energy. And I went to the parks, and they were magnificent parks. Like, I live in the 5th wealthiest county in the United States. And the parks in Copenhagen blew any park that I've seen around here out of the water. The parks were better. The architecture, I would say 200 to 300% higher quality architecture. And a lot of this had to do with eliminating the low baseline, meaning when you have an erratic and volatile, and you have a lot of volatility in the culture, you'll see, a tin shack over here. You'll see a square, ugly warehouse over here. When you don't have advertising regulations, you've got billboards all over the place. And then you have this glossy skyscraper and this glossy skyscraper and then this rundown hut over here. And you've got volatility within the architecture, within the visual ambiance. There was no volatility in Copenhagen. There was, 50% of what I see as most ugly in the United States didn't exist at all. So that bottom 50% in the visual continuum disappeared. And it wasn't that the top was significantly different. It was eliminating the bottom. Now, this is significant when you look at quality of life. This is significant because the brain amplifies the negative threats by, my best sense is 5 to 1. John Gottman, in his work on relationships, and he can accurately predict how long a relationship lasts. So I highly recommend John Gottman as a relationship scientist. If you want to grow your marriage, deepen a relationship, study relationship in one of the few arenas that can have some underlying basis in data. So John Gottman finds that if a couple does not praise, if a couple doesn't praise each other 5 times more than they criticize each other, there's a 90% chance that relationship is going to end. So it suggests, one of the things it suggests that ties in with something you already know, which is that if someone criticizes you and you don't, well, you arrive at the party, right? So how are you? Oh, you look great. Oh, you look great. Oh, what nice hair. What kind of skin toner are you using? Whatever. So you get 5 or 6 compliments, and then you hear this one person saying, "What kind of an idiot arrives at the party and wears a tie like that?" and you know they're talking about you. Well, where does your brain go? Do you focus on the fact that you've received 5 or 6 compliments? Or are you obsessing about what some half-drunk stranger said about your tie? The brain prioritizes the negative because, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what other people think about you is one of your biggest variables in whether you survive in your cult. You know, when we remember how little we actually depend on ourselves, and we understand that to arrive safely to work, about 10,000 people have to decide not to hit us with their car. Well, I mean, if any one of those 10,000 people got really mad and decided to start shooting, we're dead. If any one of 10,000 people on just one day in more than 10,000 days of going to work, we're dead. So we have to worry about negative emotion directed at us from other people because it could kill us. And so we prioritize it. And that's one of the reasons that we've developed a brain that bends towards the negative. So in that dynamic, going back to Copenhagen, when you delete the bottom side of the trauma data set, you are getting 5 times the return on investment in terms of the calmness and the quality of life for the people in that culture. If you have a group of 100 people, and for example in the United States, let's say that more than 1% of the population is just in terrible straits, homeless, incarcerated. So we've actually got, maybe 4%. Let's just say that 4% of the culture, as a conservative number, is in terrible straits. 1 in 3 domestic relationships containing domestic violence. 1 in 7 Americans being substance addicts. A majority of Americans being addicted to compulsive something. Compulsively thinking the same way, compulsively feeling the same feelings, compulsively working so that they can avoid their feelings, compulsively keeping busy with their video games or pornography so they don't have to feel certain feelings, compulsively and addictively behaving in a way that is not intelligent for the future. It's intelligent as pain management in the near term. Well, if you have this low range within the culture, and you see, for example, if I go out in the 5th wealthiest county in the United States and I make my way out to buy some orange juice, I'm going to pass at least 3 elderly homeless people. And my body is going to tell me I've seen those people before. And what that's telling me is that the 50,000 people in my town are all aware that there are elderly homeless people in my town, and not 1 in 50,000 is giving these people a home. Well, the obvious question is why? Why aren't they giving these people a home? Well, they don't have any money. Or it's actually not quite accurate. In my area, the average rent is $2,500 a month for an individual. And low rent, you've found a steal, right? If it's $1,600 a month. Well, when I interview the homeless in my town, they can pay $300 to $700 a month. That's the range I get. If I say, how much do you have a month that, if I've got a place for you, they'll answer $300 a month, $400 a month, sometimes as much as $900 a month. But there's no homes renting for that amount. And so what it means is that 50,000 people are driving by poor, traumatized. 42% of our homeless demographic has PTSD. traumatized, poor, elderly individuals because they have $300 a month rather than $1,600 a month. What we're saying as we drive by is that your dignity, your humanity, your quality of life, how long you live, whether you have trauma or not, all of that depends on $1,000 a month, or let's say $1,300 a month. That we do something for you if you had an extra $1,300, and we won't do anything for you because you don't. Now, the obvious extrapolation from this is my being, my humanity, is not worth that much in my town. What's worth that much is $1,300 a month. My town would be willing to kill me rather than spend $1,300 a month. And it gets more complicated, of course, because then you say, well, why is there no $300 a month rentals? Now, I'm talking specifically Marin County in California, where I'm having a combative dynamic with the mayor who doesn't want to address anything. And you say, well, why are there no $300 a month rentals? Because when I grew up in other parts of the U.S., there were several times when, starting out as an individual, I paid $300 a month rent, and I wouldn't have been able to afford $1,600. So in other words, if I'd grown up here, I might have been homeless because there were no $300 places, and that's, there have been 2 points in my kind of home rental and home ownership relationships with housing where I've paid, one was $250 a month rent, one was $300 a month rent in my 20s. They don't exist here, and the question is why? And it all gets down to housing bureaucracy. Because 400 or 500 years ago, there were teepees, and everyone had one. And 200 years ago, there were little log cabins, and not quite everyone had one. But if you were bumming it in a park, if there were even parks at that point, large tracts of land, no one was going to bother you. The police were not going to come out and say, get out of that treehouse, or you can't lay in this part of the forest. Or if they did, you just walk a few hundred yards and lay down in another part of the forest. But in my county, they've now made it illegal to sleep in cars, illegal to sleep on public land, illegal to sleep on private land, and oh, by the way, there's no low-income housing. Well, they say we have low-income housing, and it's like, well, okay, where is it? Well, here are the $2,000 a month rentals. There's a gap there. And so when every single time my eye sees the same old man hunching over his walker, and 1,000 cars driving by in that 20 minutes, I know intuitively that the only thing that stands between me being in my nice car and my nice house and standing on that street is $2,000 a month. That's it. And the only thing that's standing between that is a few accidents. A few accidents is all that's standing between me and being on that street corner. It's not my humanity. It's not my character. If this client doesn't pay For example, this is an unusual situation right now. I did a job for a poor woman who's paying for the whole thing on insurance, and she's, ditzy. I can't quite tell her level of integrity, but it's very unusual in this area for people's checks to bounce. So I didn't even look. But I'm going to deposit the next check at the end of the job, and her first $6,000 check had bounced. And I didn't know it bounced. So, okay, I don't have that money. And I call her up, and it turns out the check she just gave me in the finish, that's not going to clear either, because she hasn't transferred some money in account, and all my expenses for the job are out there. Now, I have enough money so that a client can stiff me in 12 grand of stuff, and I'm not on the street, but not everyone has that. And that's sometimes all it takes is one ditzy client and one bounce check and another thing, and the process unravels. A few months later, they're there on the street. Once they're there on the street for a month or so, they've got a 42% chance of developing PTSD. Once they're on the street with PTSD, the odds of them getting employed so they can get a house are almost zero. So we've created homelessness. And this doesn't happen in Denmark. They've taken the floor out of the volatility. They do not invite their citizens into PTSD-type trauma, not even 4% of them. So with nicer parks, with nicer architecture, with everyone doing a job they like, educated, doing things they liked, I asked them, how did they feel about paying 80% of their money in taxes? There was not a single one who complained. And so I got an education. I came away feeling that my quality of life would have been better if I was raised in Copenhagen, and would be better even in the top, 2% of Americans. My quality of life would be better if I went to Copenhagen. And that was a stunning realization, that they had a 400% higher quality of life than the average American, and that they took out the bottom side. And that made all the difference, because one of the reasons I got started in this detailed analysis is I've been anxious my entire life, and it started with early childhood trauma and stuff, and I'm aware of the cost of that low-grade anxiety. But as a perceptive person, I also see anxiety as a background vibe all around me. And that anxiety is the thought, if you don't do this and you don't do this and you don't do this, you could be on the street like that old man. And fear and pain are very motivational. But it's interesting with the whole, and I would call it somewhat of a dogma, because, how do you explain the fact that 30 for 30 random people in Copenhagen, with me coming in with a bias expecting to be proved right, that I was proved wrong 30 times in a row, randomly? And that I can't do that in my own city. If I approach 30 Americans, the first thing I'm going to find is that a majority of them will not be interviewed. Why? They're going to tell me they don't have enough time. So in addition to all that, the Danish people have at least 3 times more time, or consider that they do. They're willing to. So this is a huge eye-opener. And what I'm getting at is that different cults and different cultures meet the needs of their people to different degrees. If I'm born in Copenhagen, I'm going to have top medical care as much as needed at birth regardless. My parents are going to have a year of paid maternity leave. Both of them will, to bond and develop the relationship. My parents' marriage is going to hold together better because the fact that I've come along as a child is not going to jeopardize their finances and their survival. So they're not going to attack each other. You know, sex goes down when people are playing power games and stuff, which then encourages affairs. So if I'm born in Copenhagen, I'm going to be at good hospital treatment. Parents are going to make a decision about what's good for the marriage and what's good for the child, me, because they've got paid maternity leave. They're going to be in jobs that they enjoy, which means they're also going to be happier when they're talking together. Their commute is not going to be as long, and that correlates with happiness. They're going to get better sleep, which correlates with happiness. And because they're working lower hours. And part of the reason they're working lower hours is they're not working under the fear that if they don't do this and this and this, they won't get ahead and they'll be laid off. Because if they get laid off, it just means they'll take a couple of months and either retrain at public expense to a job they really want to do, or to fit a job that works better. And when you take out the fear and trauma out of the mix, they pick the jobs that are really well suited to them. So then they like them. So then they don't sabotage those jobs and do crappier work. So there's an incredible amount of stuff that opens up with these variables. And as a Danish citizen, I would say the odds are very high that you'll be at level 4 just by being born there, if not level 5, because you're going to be induced into a situation. College-educated people who don't have debt have high curiosity and vision with the rest of the world. One of the ways you can measure the health of a culture is how curious and open they are to you as a stranger. This correlates to the relationship with the unknown. The stranger represents the unknown. So if I arrive in Copenhagen and the people are more open and interested and have more time to engage with me as a source of learning and engagement and pleasure than they do in my own town, what we're talking about is a healthier culture. And so I came away feeling ripped off, which is a good American feeling, right? Because I'm paying 50% of my money in taxes. And if I could have just increased it to 80%, I would have gotten a 300% higher quality of life, which means that for each 10% increment in taxes, going from 50 to 60%, I'd get a whole nother 100% improvement in quality of life. And then going from 60 to 70%, 10% increase in taxes, another 100% increase in quality of life. And then from 70 to 80%, another 100% increase in quality of life. And as an empathic person, I don't have to wonder what's wrong with my culture, what's wrong with me, that I'm driving by old women and old men day after day with no idea what to do about it. And now that I've started to make a documentary in homelessness in my town, I'm actually at war with the city because the city views our homeless people as their enemy and as an embarrassment. So they don't want to engage. They refuse to share information. It's gotten to the point where I'm looking at suing my city for incompetence and mismanagement because they're spending $40,000 to $60,000 a year policing, redoing parks, managing ER visits, while simultaneously legislating low-cost housing out of existence. Because there's tons of land all over the place. You just tell the city, I want to put up a little 120 square foot cottage for this homeless person off the grid and rent it to them for $300 or $400 a month. And they say, you can't do that. You can't solve the homeless problem yourself as a citizen in a free country. They've taken that freedom away from you. And it's why I don't see any homelessness in Thailand. I don't see any homelessness in Thailand because the Thai people are allowed to build whatever level of house they want to build on their own land, period. And it just takes $300 to stick up a tin roofed hut. So they all do. And if they're rich, they stick up a mansion. If they're poor, they stick up a tin hut. There's no one without a safe, legal place to sleep in a country that makes $300 a month per capita rather than, I make $10,000 a month. Well, that's kind of my quality of life is, $4,000 for the house and $300 a month. They're all housed. $10,000 a month, 1% of, my population. Many of them elderly or have mental problems, etc., do not have access to safe, legal housing. And so this all ties in with this rule. Climb and help others to continuously climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what does this look like? Well, you make a list of what you need to survive, and do you have all of those? You make a list of what you need to feel secure in being able to continually have all of those. Do you have any of those? You look at backup plans. Okay, an uninsured motorist rams in you from the side and snaps your neck and you're in hospital for 3 months. What happens to you then in this cult? Can you still survive? Do you have 3 months of savings plus, the fact that your insurance company is going to want you to be paying premiums when you can't work to bring in income? That's the way we've set it up here. Now, what I'm saying is that a culture such as Denmark or Danish culture that ensures that its people will not go below the trauma threshold in survival is doing an enormous gift. It's providing an enormous benefit to that whole culture. The well-being in that culture, the level of anxiety is going to lift because you're not getting regular reminders that your life is in jeopardy based on $1,300 a month. So the rule is climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And right after you develop your talents, you have a need to, after you've met your own needs for security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing a talent, developing your potential, you have a need to start including and broadening, and as you reach that potential, reaching out, and that'll take you towards synergy with other people, seeing opportunities that can be developed together. And in time, that's going to take you towards transcendence, thinking more about other people than yourself. Not because you haven't taken care of the rent. That's the unhealthy bypass. That's when you have the hippie who doesn't have enough money for gas talking about how they're living their life for world peace, but would you mind paying for their gas? Because they've got to drive to the next town to tell people about their quest for world peace. And it's a completely different thing to enter the domain of concern for other people, having met one's own personal needs and developed one's personal skills and developed relationship technology. It's a completely different, stepping into that domain than to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to have and keep friends. I don't know how to be faithful. I don't know, I don't know what the laws are. I don't know how to be useful to someone else. But wouldn't it be nice if we could all take care of each other, i.e. everyone else can take care of me, and theoretically one day I'll take care of other people? Wouldn't that be nice? And so it's a different relationship. This is why it's a hierarchy of human needs. But it's what this hierarchy suggests is that if you have a healthy human being who has met their needs for survival, who is secure in those needs, who has met their needs for love and belonging, who has met their needs for self-esteem, who has developed their talent and met their needs all that much more in a capitalist framework of, the more talented you are. If, we have our chauvinism of valuing certain skills like stockbroker way more than artist and other things. But still, once you are competent in your field, then all of the bottom needs are strengthened. And what happens is you begin to think of something bigger than yourself. You begin to enter that domain of transcending the myopia of the trauma-based self-absorption. Because the more traumatized you are, the more you're unsure of your own survival, the more self-absorbed you are. One of the, again, ways that you can tell how secure a culture feels is their level of hospitality. If you enter another culture and their biggest concern is how you as a foreigner feel and are welcome in the culture, that we're speaking of a very high level of courtesy based on a very low level of trauma. Because it takes a discipline that's hard to sustain if you're worried about your own survival. And it gives some indication of how traumatized much of the U.S. population is. Because an American going to another culture expects other cultures to speak English, for example. You can go to Thailand and you can listen to the frustration and outrage on an American's face that the Thai don't speak English. And then you have the same American meet a Thai person in America who's coming over as a tourist, and they'll be even more furious. What do you mean you came to America and you don't speak English? And then they'll go to Thailand, they'll be, what do you mean you're living in your own country and you don't speak English? I'm here. And that level of self-absorption correlates with the level of survival fear. People who are insecure in meeting their basic needs are by definition more self-absorbed, because that's a healthy response, meaning you can't afford to be too altruistic if you're about to be killed. You've got to think, how am I going to survive? That's a self-centered position. But as soon as you have your basic needs met, you become more generous and outgoing. Like, how could I be making these videos for you if I was terrified that my neighbor was going to rape my daughter any minute now? I wouldn't be able to focus because my survival needs would be activated. And so I would be self-centered. How am I going to stop this? What am I going to do about this? Because you're not out there able to help me with that. And so I'd be focused on myself and my daughter. The reason that I'm able to do something like this is the fact that that threat is not happening right now. And so what we see is that the more secure a population is in their ability to meet their basic needs, the more naturally they're curious and empathic with things bigger than themselves, the rest of the world. And when you look through that particular lens, I find both Thai culture and Danish culture to be healthier, because they are more informed about America, more curious about America, more interested in America, and more courteous to me as an American than the average American is for someone visiting here. You ask the average American anything about Thailand, they know almost nothing other than, isn't that where prostitutes go? Oh yeah, there's a small business of prostitution to serve Americans, because that's all Americans can think about. So yeah, in response to Vietnam and in response to American self-absorption, there is a prostitute element. But there's a whole 4,000-year history that you don't know about, and you don't know that you don't know about, and you're not interested in, because it's not all about me. Traumatized people are all about me. People that are in that state of developing gifts and developing excellence and moving through beyond themselves and wanting to give something back, those are the people that have transcended the traumatic wounds in their own childhood and that understand that there's something bigger than themselves out there. Now, when you help someone in survival move from survival to security about survival, you move them a step closer to developing their talents, their gifts. You move them a step closer towards being able to form healthy relationships. You can't focus on investing in long-term relationships when you're trying to get through the week. It's just hanging on, getting through the day. And so the rule is constantly take steps at a rate you are competent and comfortable to take to increase your survival, to increase your security, to increase your love and belonging, to increase your self-esteem, which is just the sense that you like yourself. I don't like myself when I'm being petty and hurting other people. So, making clear, I don't like myself when I'm being dishonest. So if I can have a set of principles that I want to be this person, and I'm getting closer to that ideal every day, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about self-esteem. I like myself because I'm using discipline and choice to be closer to the person that I want to be. And it's really hard, by the way, it's really hard to look at someone else and say they're a liar, they're a cheat, they're lazy, I hate them, and lie, cheat, and be lazy and like yourself. There's a symmetry in the way that our brain works. And so if we want to if we want to like ourselves, and what we like in others is intelligence and kindness and honesty and hard work and making a contribution in the community, and you say, I like that person, meaning I like people who embody that quality. Well, then to like yourself, you've got to do things that move you towards those 5 values. You can't do the exact opposite and say, I hate them when they do it, but I like myself when I do it. It's fuzzy math. And one of the things that we learn, and this actually may be one of the rules, I think I'll add that, move towards integrity. It's more integrated. If I say I like that person because they're generous, but I like me because I don't give anyone anything, you've got 2 sets of books. You've got 2 sets of rules. But if we say I like other people because they're generous, and I like myself because I'm generous, and I'm honest about that. It's not like, I call myself generous when I give 1 hot dog, and I call someone else stingy when they give 1 hot dog. Someone has to give me 3 hot dogs before I call them generous, and for me, when I give 1 hot dog, I'm generous. Again, 2 sets of books. So, in this dynamic, if I'm moving towards the things that I admire in other people, then I'm going to like myself, because we default to integrity, which is integrated standards. We default to that mathematically. We adjust it socially and politically, where it's fine if my friend drives fast through the kids' neighborhood because he's in a hurry doing really important work, don't you understand? And no, he cares about children. He's a very important person. But this other person who's driving fast in the neighborhood, look at them. They don't care about kids. They're low lifes. They're probably going out to get drunk. They're terrible for driving fast. But my friend, the stress he's under. And just let him drive 40 miles an hour through the kid zone, and so we do these things. In part, and this shows how important relationships are. We want to keep our relationships. And one of the ways you can tell a crappy friend is they'll support you doing crappy behavior, and they'll reinforce your lack of integration, your lack of integrity. Again, every time you create two sets of books, two sets of principles. If my friend coming, oh, sure, they have to block the thing because we're having an important party. But, if the neighbors comes, how dare they step 2 feet onto my parking lot? I should call the police. It takes a lot of energy to create two sets of books. So when we're moving towards integrity, we're moving towards integration. Integration is always more efficient than dissociation. And that's not entirely true, but in thinking, it's a lot easier if you just say telling the truth is a good idea. So the government should tell the truth, and the police should tell the truth, and I should tell the truth, and my enemy should tell the truth, and my friend should tell the truth. And it doesn't take a lot of energy. It takes enormous energy to break that down into very complicated rules that explain why my friend should be able to lie, and me too, because you don't understand. It's like I cheat on my taxes for important reasons. But no, other people shouldn't cheat on their taxes. So it's harder to it takes a lot of effort to break down all these little rules. So you focus on integrity, and in this case, self-esteem, working to be the person that you want to be. So if you understand that this is a hierarchy, and you understand, for example, the prostitution nature of a money-based culture. So, for example, what if someone is barely surviving and is offered a job scamming seniors around healthcare? If they don't take the job, and let's say they're being offered to it as a homeless, because this is where when you induce desperation and you leave that as a chronic statistic within a culture, you are putting people in a choice between, okay, so you now have a group of desperate people who are going to be willing to do things they don't like about themselves because survival trumps self-esteem. So, you have that dynamic, and a certain percentage of people, given the choice of being homeless or scamming seniors. And of course, they'll make it sound nice, like, what we're doing is we're helping these people, but you see clearly you're trying to upsell them something you don't think they need. You're trying to get them to use their credit cards when they don't have enough savings, and you don't believe in the product. You wouldn't recommend it to your mother, but you're going to call and tell people, come on, use this product. And this gets into that dynamic where the Danish people don't need to and don't take these jobs, and they don't have these jobs because it would be more fun to live on the dole than scam seniors. But it would be even more fun to make a valuable contribution in an area they're competent. And so you have this progression of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the end of the hierarchy is this need for transcendence and legacy, to go beyond the sense of just me and just my culture and just me as the individual, to participate in something bigger than myself for the joy of making that contribution for for the service because it's responsible, because it makes me happy to make a difference in other people's lives. And we have that region of the brain where our greatest joy, our greatest fulfillment is making a positive difference in someone else's life. Now, this sounds like a horrific burden when you're down at security, and it is. It sounds like a frustrating irritant when you're down at can I be secure in my survival? Can I make any friends? And you're trying to make a friend, and nobody likes you, and these people don't like you, and these people don't like you, and you're trying to do that, but over here you've got someone who is asking you to transcend. Don't worry about trying to be liked. Don't worry about survival. Don't worry about being able to have sex. Don't worry about any of that. Focus on other people. And it's like, get the fuck out of here. Just leave me alone. I'm trying to survive. Survival, security, love, and belonging. I haven't even gotten to the point where I'm able to think, what do I want to be, and am I moving towards that? So I'm trying to survive. Get the hell out of here with all these guilt trips about starving children. I don't care about those. Or fine, I see the person I'm trying to impress, and this is where you can force that. If you're in an altruistic community, and in order to be accepted, you've got to give something, then someone will give something in order to belong. But what they're not doing that from the joy in their heart. They're doing that because that makes that person they're trying to get approval from smile at them. That means that person's more likely to recommend them for a job or let them date their daughter or whatever it is. And so you can force that by saying that to be loved and belong in this culture, we have to be of service. And so, okay, fine. What do I have to do to be loved and belong in this culture? But then there's also a state after we like ourselves, after we've developed our gifts, after we have our needs met, there's also a state on the other side of that where my greatest joy is the fact that I could help this person come along on the journey. That, it's just so exciting to think that, I started my business 30 years ago, and a young teenager in my neighborhood approached me, and I gave them some advice, and I'm helping them along, and I can see where they're going to go if they continue this path, and and I'll help them, loan them some money, not because it's a great risk, but because I think that would help them do this and this, and it's just so much fun. Or a grandparent with the grandchild, to be able to enjoy the innocence and the wonder of being there for a child, having met the child with the parent. Oh, who's going to watch the child in America? And, a country that has no national paid maternity for either parent, unlike Denmark that has it for both parents. How do you respond to that? And so it's a very good rule that if anything that you do will help you reach to the point of at least self-esteem, where you're becoming the person you're trying to like. And then once you've reached that point, help someone else. And sometimes in a couple relationship, the best way for your health to increase is actually to invest in your partner. I'm teaching my wife all the aspects of my 25 years of business, and one of the ways that strengthens our unit of survival, security, love, and belonging is it means that, for example, if I broke my back, the business wouldn't just fall apart because I couldn't move physically. There'd be someone else with the primary interest in the family that knew how to do things. So there's more resiliency when you have redundancy because, both people have, similar skills. And so in that sense, there's a nice natural cycle, particularly in a community unit or a family unit. And this is one of the things that can be so damaging about this endless migration without commitment that is such a central part of modern culture. Because when you have endless migration without commitment and no container, it is an immediate loss for anyone to take time to try and help one of these migrant wanderers. Whether it's a relationship partner where you're just moving in and out of, anonymous sex or promiscuous arousal. I mean, if your goal is adrenaline and sex and sexual variety, why would you ever teach someone how to use a pickaxe, or teach someone how to fix an irrigation problem, or teach someone how to run your online banking in the case of this or that happening? Or why would you do that? And the obvious question is you wouldn't. And so you don't. And so what we create are these fragile individual pillars that are not interconnected and supported. And then we create a certain demographic within our cult that fail on a statistical basis regularly because they're too dissociated and no one sees it as in their interest because no one's owning them. No one's saying, we're going to get you through this, and in 10 years, this will have served all of us. It will have served all of us in the next 10 years that you're a functioning member of this community and that your debts are paid off and this and that and the other. And so we're going to do that together. And you're not going to betray that container any more than we are. And we'll all be stronger. And we'll respect that container. And the fact that more intelligent behavior occurs because of that container. And that's really the value of container. And when you have a container of 5 people, let's say, or 2 people rather than just 1, or 7 people rather than just 5, who are all committed to everyone in that container moving through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, there is not going to be any one of us under any circumstances that doesn't have survival covered. We will do what it takes. Your passport got stolen, this got thing, you got malaria. Okay, we're there. You are going to survive. And you're going to be secure in that. And your relationship is going to be safe. And then as you get healthy, you're going to work your ass off to reinvest in the container so that the container is not steadily weakened because of your existence. You're going to invest where you can. And so this is all part of this first rule. And to bring it back to its core nub, you can just ask yourself, is this action I'm taking today helping me move closer towards that position of abundance, of mastery of my gifts, of liking the person who I'm becoming, of building my relationships? Is this helping me move in that direction? And closer to that point, where like a flower opening in the warmth of spring air, the warmth of low stress, the warmth of abundance, the warmth of pride and esteem, the warmth of recognition and respect, opening up like a flower in the spring air that says, I want to make a difference in something bigger than myself. I want to reach out beyond my community. I want to reach out beyond my religion. I want to reach out beyond my dogma, beyond my politics. And I want to make a difference. I want to invest in the vitality of the species by seeing that someone else who perhaps is barely surviving, they were just raped, their parents were just murdered, they were stuck in a foster care by someone who has no interest in them as a human being, is just using the money. And I'm going to take one person in our cult, and I'm going to see that they survive. And having moved to survival, I'm going to see that they're secure in their survival. I'm going to see that they learn how to have more love and belonging beginning with me. I'm going to help them think about, after they recover from their trauma, because when you're in scarcity and you're born into that level, you sometimes can't get that there actually is a friendly world out there, and that the entire universe is not a direct mirror of the most abusive and small-minded human beings that you had the misfortune of being exposed to. So once that trauma and that projection can be shattered, to then who do you want to be as a human being, and help you become that. And then help you develop your gifts. What are your gifts, and who are you uniquely, and how can you bring that to support that? And then watch this, the ultimate joy, as we join each other in moving beyond the individual level to something bigger, something poetic, something musical, that call to art, to the muse, to the probability field, to the possibility field of human beings. I want to be a part of that. It feeds me to invest in that. And that completes the first rule for life.